Hello, everybody. My name is Nicholas.
And I'm Burju.
We're from the Google Drive Developer Relations team live from Zurich. And we're here today to talk to you about cross-client authorization on Android and the web. So, Burju, could you basically explain us in what case this is interesting to the user? Who should use that?
Yeah, most of the time, all of the, your projects may have more than two components, the web and the mobile. So the authorization experience between cross these different applications is always some troubling. So we listened to developer feedback and we wanted to improve the experience for the users. And back in May, we introduced two features that will actually help you a little bit more.
So could you just give me a few examples of architectures basically that developers have where they should use this? For example, they have an Android app and a server-side component. They need to
for example, you want to delegate some tasks to the server side, such as processing data on the server side instead of the mobile application. So in this case, your web server needs to be authorized as well as your mobile app. But just imagine that your user discovered the app on a store and downloaded it and authorized it and haven't touched to the web component.
Haven't authorized yet on the web.
So what you basically can do is to just retrieve an access token, which is likely to be not for long, just an hour or so. So if you would like to delegate some work, some background and offline work to the service itself, it's basically not so possible. I've seen some bad implementations that people were trying to exchange the access token with the web server, but even from a security point of view, it's not good. And also, the tokens are not living long. So
so basically, this is for developers that have both a web component, could be a separate app or just a server-side backend to run some process, and also, for example, an Android app. And those two needs to authorize in a very nice UX-friendly way, basically. Right? Is that correct?
True.
And you also want to avoid just passing a simple access token, which you could have done before, using the regular Play Services authorization. Right.
This was one of the features. The other feature we have released was we resolve users' identity with no sign-in on the Android app if you are authorized for the web component. Just imagine in this case that you have a web app and user is given the right permissions, and once he wants to switch back to the mobile app, he needs to go through again the authorization and need to.
So you want to avoid the user to authorize twice, once on the web app, and then they want to try your Android app and they have to authorize again. So this is a way to have the user already authorized, right? So maybe we could have a look on your computer in details at the documentation, so we could explain how this works, basically.
Sure. Let's go through our documentation first, the developers.
So first, let me explain the developer here who are watching us. The documentation can be found in a few places. We are from the Google Drive SDK team, so we have written a Google Drive specific documentation on the Google Drive SDK, online doc. You can go there. It's fairly generic, so you could apply this to more
other Google APIs.
With
different scopes.
Yes, with different scopes, just by simply applying different scopes. But there's also a documentation on the Android documentation itself, which doesn't contain a lot of code samples, which is why we've augmented it by releasing this documentation here. So maybe you could show us where that page is.
It's under authorized requests, and we have this section, choose a platform. We will go to the Android one, and there's a new section called CrossClient identity, and this basically explains implementation for both of the features. So let's first start with how to retrieve a code for the server so the server can have offline access.
So this is basically when the user goes on the Android application first, and you want to authorize your server side to be able to do either, for example, long-term long-term processing, because before we launched that feature, the Play services only allowed you to fetch an access token, which is only valid for 1 hour. So if you could have passed this to your server side, but as we'll see in just a second, this feature now allows you to pass longer-term tokens. For example, the refresh token. It allows your server side to fetch a refresh token, which grants unlimited access in time to your server side components.
So if you're Android developer already, you should be familiar with how to get an access token. It's actually all of the utilities are bundled in this GMS core. Yeah. So we take care of how we install to
Play
Google,
services.
Yeah, Play services. Yeah. So what we provide to you is this utility interface to get an access token. So instead, what you were basically doing here was...
So let me just explain. If you're already using the Play services to authorize, you would simply pass the scopes, right? The OAuth 2 scopes of the APIs that you needed access to. For example, the Google Drive API, the Google Plus API, etc. Right?
So yeah, you were providing the account and the scopes, and you were retrieving an access token for you.
Yeah.
In this case, what we have done, instead of just passing the scopes, you need to pass another magic string, let's say, and we will just give you a code instead of an access token.
Yes. So basically, you've highlighted this on the screen. I
highlighted it, and you need to format the scope like OAuth 2 column server client ID, and you need to append your web apps client ID here, which is basically in this format, and it's available
typically in this format. So one very important point for developers, your two client IDs, the Android client ID and also your web client ID, need to be in the same API console project. This is how we detect that those two client IDs are linked.
That's true. And you can still, you need to pass, the list of scopes again.
Yeah. So I see up there in red, could you highlight it? There is currently a little limitation.
We have a warning here. We currently require plus login to be included in the scope.
Yeah. So one of the scopes need to be the plus the login scope for this authorization feature to work. This is currently, basically mandatory in the current implementation.
Yeah, otherwise we will not be able to retrieve a code. That's true.
All right, and then the API should basically allow you to get
a code,
an authorization code, which you can pass to your server side, and the server side will exchange it.
Yeah, you will continue the flow by retrieving here, by just making a post request as regular and retrieve.
This is regular OAuth 2, by the way. You exchange the authorization code for a refresh token and an access token.
So there's one thing I need to tell. Instead of passing the redirect URL.
Yeah. So typically with the regular web flow, let me explain. You need to pass one of the parameter here that you need to pass in the request is your redirect URI. Except here, there's no redirect URI since it's all done on Android, using a native interface. So you basically simply skip it in the request. That's what I see. Yeah. And this should work. You exchange the authorization code and get your refresh token, basically.
Yeah, so you will basically retrieve two tokens, an access and refresh token. So the server side can make its request on behalf of itself. Yeah.
Cool.
So,
is there anything else that the user can do?
Of course. So let's switch back to the
I
other
knew you were going to say that.
So in this case, let's take a look how to resolve user identity without sign-in. It's again a magic string instead of passing the regular.
So what is this feature? In which case should developers use this feature again?
So you want to know.
This is a bit different from the one you just talked about.
So you want to know who the user is. You want to know what's the user's email address. You need to identify the user somehow on your server.
So you need to identify the user on the server. That's, for example, if you're sending data that you need to save for your user, you want to pass also in a secure way the identity of the user, right? So that your server side can save that data for the right user, for instance. Is that it? Okay.
So in order to, again, pass in the regular scope string, we have this time this string, which is audio column server, again, the client
So
ID.
basically this works the same way that we've just seen.
Yeah,
but using the play services.
We still need to call, Google Auth util get token, the same interface, and it will
just
basically
pass a different magic string. Okay.
So
so what does this give you?
What it gives us is a JSON web token. It's actually decrypted, and you need to pass it to your web server. It's encrypted. I'm sorry. You need to, pass it to your server, and your server need to decrypt it again, and it basically have these attributes: ISS, OUD, AZP, and the user's email. Okay, cool. So this is basically an encrypted token containing the user email, which then you can use to identify your developer. I just wanted to, point out developers to, compare this to what was already existing before we launched this. Basically, in the past, you could have done this by passing an access token. That gave you access to the user info API, for example, or our OpenID endpoints. This is basically nicer because the server side is going to save one fetch request, right? You can simply, get the GWT in your request, decrypt it. There is no external request. Your server side is going to know already, right away, what the email of the user is. Whereas if you pass an access token to your server side, you would have had to fetch. Which is also quite secure, but it would have had to fetch the user identity. So it's an additional request.
It's an additional request, and also probably also verify the access token itself. See if it's actually been issued by the app to avoid forged requests. So this is a very nice way.
Yeah, but you need to be careful. First of all, you have to make sure that you are transmitting this token on HTTPS instead of HTTP. And you have to make sure that ISS is accounts at google.com. It's easy to fake. So you have to make sure that AUD attribute is the client ID of web app, and the other one is the client ID of your Android app, and then you can trust that the user email is actually what Google endpoints have returned back.
Sure.
Yeah.
But this is very nice. So you avoid a few requests. So you're able to do this a lot faster and a lot more efficiently. Sorry, on your backend.
So we actually have a sample that already implements. Let's go return back. Actually, this is the repo.
Yeah. So this is our GitHub repository of the Google Drive team. Basically,
so we have
publish a bunch of samples,
libraries. So we published CrossClient to Android almost a week ago, maybe. So it basically demonstrates two cases. Let's quickly go through the code.
So it's a bit more, the sample is a bit more complete to what you'll find in the documentation, which skips a lot of corner case, just show you the bare bone of the code. This is almost kind of like a working
example
of a usage of these two features that we've just seen.
So as I mentioned, in order to get a token, you need to pass also a user account name. In this case, what I'm doing firstly in the sample is I'm starting an activity to pick a user here. So there should be multiple users on the phone, so user can switch between back and forth between different accounts. So once user has picked one, we are here. This callback, what I'm doing is actually starting two asynchronous tasks to retrieve first the code, exchange code, and the JSON web token. So let's go what we're doing here and see what we're doing here. So in order to retrieve a code, what we do is just formatting this scope in the format that I mentioned before. So instead of an access token, what it will do is to retrieve a code.
Authorization code, yeah. OAuth to authorization.
By the way, if your user is not haven't give you enough permissions before, it will throw a user recoverable auth exception.
So this is if the user has never granted that authorization to the app, neither on the web version of your web app, nor on the Android version.
And for the scopes you have passed.
For that exactly stuff.
Yes. So what you can do here is that this exception as an intent. So, regularly it's the same while you're trying to retrieve an access token, right? Mm-hmm. If the user doesn't give you enough permissions, you start a new activity for the dialogue.
Basically the user will get a nice native authorization dialogue on their Android device where they can simply explicitly approve or reject the authorization that the app is asking for.
That's true. So once user has given access, I'm going to check if user is really given access to us or not. So in this case, if it's yes, I'm actually retrying the same request. So in this case, instead of this exception, I will be able to retrieve the code. And what I'm basically doing here is just put it on the application's UI, but you need to pass it to your web server.
That's when you do like an HTTP request to send it to your server side, which will exchange it basically.
Yeah. In another case, in order to retrieve a JSON web token, what you do is to format the scope. In this case here, I'm highlighting it.
Yeah, and again, catching the exception if this, if it's never been approved before, if the authorization has never been granted before, and it probably works the same way. Is that correct?
Yeah. Okay. So it will return back to this line again, and I will be retrying again. So and it will retrieve a JSON web token, and you can use it to you can pass it to your web server, and your web server can resolve the identity of the user. Yeah.
Cool. So maybe we're done with the documentation and the sample code here. So basically, let's talk about in general, what is it good for? What are the advantages in using that feature against what was possible before? So in my understanding, and you can let me know if you agree, this is very nice because it's going to provide completely Android native experience to your users while still keeping two client IDs in sync. So what developers were doing before, previously to this, some were using a web view on their Android app to start an OAuth 2 flow using the client ID of their web app to have a common client ID, which wasn't very nice, right? Because the user had to log in again inside the web flow. There, you'll get a very, very nice native experience with those native pop-ups. The user is already, signed in into his Android machine and can very, very quickly approve. And you'll still get, auto approval on the website if you have also web components.
It's a seamless experience for the user, first of all. And we enabled offline access, which was basically not available before. So that's basically it. And we release the samples, so we're actually looking for developer feedback. These two tokens are, a little bit more experimental, and maybe in the future we can, extend the OAuth 2 spec.
It's basically kind of like a workaround around the OAuth 2 specs, because OAuth 2 has never really defined a way to do cross-client authorization. Gotcha. So this is our implementation, our way to do it. We hope you like it. If you'd like to give us some feedback, please have a look at our code sample on our GitHub Google Drive page. You can leave comments there, I guess. You
can file issues if there's a problem, and you can contribute back.
We'll be happy to hear what you have to say about this. All right. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about, Borsu?
I think that's it.
Okay, cool. Then, thanks very much, guys, or everybody, guys and girls, for watching. And, we hope to see you another time. So it was Nicolas and Borsu, live from Zurich. All right, bye-bye.
Bye.